Welcome to this deep dive.
Okay.
Today we're going to be exploring selections from the book of Daniel,
Okay.
specifically focusing on the experiences of Daniel and his companions in their Babylonian captivity.
Right.
It's a story
Yeah.
full of faith and resilience and even some pretty wild dreams and prophecies.
It is.
I'm really curious to see how Daniel and his friends navigated the pressures of a foreign culture while staying true to their beliefs.
Yeah.
And what about those mysterious dreams of Nebuchadnezzar? What secrets did Daniel unlock there?
Well, you've hit on some of the most intriguing aspects of Daniel's story. It's not just about surviving captivity, but about thriving in the face of challenges,
Right.
holding on to your identity when surrounded by different values.
Exactly.
Um,
So we're starting with the story of Daniel's captivity.
okay.
It's important to remember that Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had just conquered Jerusalem.
Nice.
That's when he takes a group of captives back to Babylon,
Right.
including Daniel and his friends.
And these weren't just random captives.
Right.
The text specifically mentions they were chosen for their intelligence, wisdom, and potential for leadership.
Right.
It seems Nebuchadnezzar was trying to integrate the brightest young minds from Jerusalem into his own court.
Almost like a forced assimilation program.
In a way, yes. They were given Babylonian names,
Wow.
offered the best food and wine immersed in the Babylonian culture.
Yeah.
But that's where Daniel's famous dietary dilemma comes in.
He refuses to eat the king's food, right?
Right.
Even though it could be seen as a sign of disrespect or even rebellion.
Yeah.
Why was that such a big deal for Daniel?
It goes beyond just personal preference.
Okay.
For Daniel, following the Jewish dietary laws was about maintaining his spiritual purity, his connection to his God in a culture that worshipped many gods.
Wow.
It was a bold statement of faith and identity.
Right.
Imagine being a teenager in a foreign land and saying no to the king's delicacies.
Oh, yeah.
That takes some serious conviction.
It really does. And it's interesting because the story tells us that Daniel and his companions actually thrived on their simple diet.
Yeah.
They looked healthier than those who indulged in Babylonian cuisine.
That outcome adds another layer to this act of faith. It suggests that staying true to his beliefs, even when it was difficult, led to unexpected benefits.
Right.
It's almost like a validation of his commitment.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So let's move on to this incredible episode of Nebuchadnezzar's dream.
Okay.
We're told he has this incredibly vivid dream about a giant statue made of different metals. But when he wakes up, he can't remember the details.
And this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Nebuchadnezzar calls upon all his wise men, his advisors, astrologers, everyone,
Wow.
and demands they tell him both the dream and its interpretation.
It seems like a pretty impossible request, doesn't it?
It was.
Yeah.
And the Babylonian wise men are stumped.
Right.
They protest, saying no one can do what the king is asking. This really highlights the limits of worldly wisdom when confronted with something beyond human understanding.
It creates a perfect opening for Daniel to step in.
Yeah.
And he does, revealing not only the forgotten dream, but also its meaning.
It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. What did the dream actually show?
It's a striking image.
Okay.
The statue is made of gold, silver, bronze, and iron, representing a succession of kingdoms, each less glorious than the last.
Right.
The golden head, of course, represents Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian Empire, but the dream doesn't end there.
There's the mysterious stone, right? The one that smashes the statue to pieces. What's the significance of that?
That's where the prophecy takes a dramatic turn. This stone, not cut by human hands, represents a kingdom unlike any other, a kingdom that will ultimately supersede all earthly powers.
Wow.
Some scholars connect this prophecy to the coming of a Messiah, a divine kingdom that will endure forever.
Right.
But others have different interpretations.
Okay.
It's one of the most debated passages in the book of Daniel.
So it's a prophecy that's both specific with its imagery of kingdoms and metals, and yet also open to interpretation.
Exactly. It speaks to the complexity of prophecy, and perhaps it's that very ambiguity that makes it so fascinating.
Right.
It allows for different perspectives and invites us to ponder the deeper meaning behind these symbols.
It's like a puzzle that each generation tries to solve in its own way.
You could say that,
Right.
but the core message seems clear.
Okay.
Empires may rise and fall, but ultimately there's a power greater than any earthly kingdom.
This brings us to another iconic story, the fiery furnace.
Yeah.
Nebuchadnezzar builds this massive golden statue and demands that everyone under penalty of death bow down and worship it.
Right.
It sounds a bit like a power move, wouldn't you say?
It certainly is.
Yeah.
He's consolidating his authority, making it clear that everyone, even those from foreign lands, must submit to his will.
All right.
But of course, this poses a huge dilemma for Daniel's friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Because they refuse to bow down. What's at stake for them here?
Well,
I mean, it's not just about disagreeing with the king.
right.
It's about defying him in the most public way possible.
Their defiance is a direct challenge to Nebuchadnezzar's claim to absolute power.
Right.
It's about staying true to their monotheistic faith, their belief in the one true God, even when faced with the threat of death.
Wow.
It takes incredible courage to stand up to that kind of pressure.
And the consequences are swift and brutal.
They are.
They're thrown into this fiery furnace heated 7 times hotter than normal.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine anyone surviving that.
It's a scene designed to instill terror,
Right?
to emphasize the absolute power of the king.
Yeah.
But of course, what happens next turns the tables completely.
They survive.
I do.
Not only that, they're unharmed, walking around the furnace with a 4th figure who looks like the Son of God.
Right.
That's a pretty dramatic twist.
It's a powerful image of divine intervention, of God protecting those who remain faithful even in the face of impossible odds. It's a story that's resonated throughout history, inspiring people facing persecution for their beliefs.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
It does.
What role does faith play in overcoming seemingly insurmountable challenges?
It's a question that goes beyond the specifics of this story.
Right.
It speaks to the power of belief, the strength that comes from holding on to something greater than yourself, even when the world around you seems to be crumbling.
Speaking of crumbling, let's move on to Nebuchadnezzar himself.
Okay.
He has another disturbing dream,
Uh-huh.
this time about a magnificent tree that gets chopped down.
And unlike the first dream, which was about empires,
Right.
this one is deeply personal.
Okay.
It's a prophecy about Nebuchadnezzar's own fate.
Again, it's Daniel who interprets the dream, right?
Yes. He explains that the tree represents Nebuchadnezzar,
Right.
and that the dream foretells a period of humiliation, a descent into madness for 7 years as a consequence of his pride.
Oh, wow.
It's a stark warning about the danger of arrogance, the need for humility even for those in positions of power.
And chillingly, the prophecy comes true.
It does.
Nebuchadnezzar loses his sanity living like a wild animal for 7 years.
But the story doesn't end there.
Okay.
After this period of humiliation, Nebuchadnezzar acknowledges God's sovereignty and his sanity is restored.
So there's a message of redemption woven into this tale of judgment.
Exactly.
Right.
It's never too late to recognize a power greater than yourself, to acknowledge the limits of your own understanding.
Let's shift gears now and talk about Belshazzar, Nebuchadnezzar's successor.
Okay.
He throws this lavish feast using sacred vessels looted from the Jerusalem temple.
Right.
It seems like a recipe for disaster.
It is.
Yeah.
Belshazzar's actions are a blatant display of disrespect, not just for the people of Jerusalem, but for their God.
Right.
It's a transgression that doesn't go unnoticed.
And then during the feast, a disembodied hand appears and writes a cryptic message on the palace wall.
Oh, wow.
You can almost hear the record scratch, can't you?
It's a scene designed to evoke a sense of dread of impending doom. And once again, the Babylonian wise men are clueless.
Yeah.
They can't decipher the message.
Enter Daniel, who's brought in to interpret the writing.
Right.
What do these mysterious words, many, many tickle Luparson, actually mean?
They're a chilling judgment on Belshazzar and his kingdom. They foretell the imminent fall of Babylon.
Right.
A message that God has weighed Belshazzar and found him wanting.
And just as Daniel predicts, that very night, Belshazzar is killed and the Medes and Persians conquer Babylon.
Right.
An empire built on arrogance and injustice crumbles.
It's a powerful reminder of the transient nature of worldly power.
Yeah.
No empire, no matter how mighty, can escape the consequences of its actions. There's a moral arc to history, a sense that justice eventually prevails.
And that seems like a good place to wrap up part 1 of our deep dive.
Okay.
We've seen Daniel navigate some pretty tricky situations.
He has.
From dietary dilemmas to interpreting cryptic dreams. And through it all, there's this underlying theme of faith courage and the struggle between earthly power and divine authority.
It's a fascinating story.
It's fascinating stuff.
It really is. And I think what's so compelling about these stories is that they still resonate with us today.
Right.
We might not be facing Babylonian kings or fiery furnaces,
Yeah.
but we all encounter challenges that test our convictions, force us to make difficult choices.
Right.
And perhaps in Daniel's story, we can find inspiration and guidance for navigating those challenges with integrity and resilience.
I think that's a great point.
Yeah. Yep.
It's striking how Daniel's ability to interpret dreams and visions isn't just presented as a cool parlor trick.
Right.
It's actually a key part of his leadership and influence in the Babylonian court.
Yeah.
It makes me think about how we often view leadership today.
Hmm.
Is there something we can learn from how Daniel used his unique skill?
It's a great observation.
Yeah.
Think about it. In ancient Babylon, dreams were considered messages from the divine realm, a direct line to the gods.
Right.
Being able to understand those messages gave Daniel incredible access to the king's inner thoughts, fears, and even potential glimpses into the future of the kingdom.
Wow.
It wasn't just about knowing what the dream meant. It was about knowing what to do with that knowledge.
So he was almost like a counselor using his insights to guide the king's decisions.
Precisely. Daniel uses his interpretations to advise the king to potentially avert disaster. And even, it seems, to promote policies that align with his own values.
Okay.
It's a subtle but powerful form of leadership.
Right.
He's not commanding armies or leading revolts, but he's shaping the course of events through his wisdom and insight.
It's almost like he's playing 4D chess while everyone else is stuck playing checkers.
Exactly. He's operating on a different level of awareness, and that gives him a strategic advantage. It's not about manipulating the king, but about understanding the deeper meaning behind events and using that understanding to influence outcomes.
This makes me think about how we approach leadership today.
Yeah.
We might not be interpreting dreams,
All right.
but are there parallels in terms of the skills and qualities that make for effective leadership? Could Daniel's story offer any insights for modern leaders?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Daniel's story highlights the importance of wisdom, not just knowledge, but the ability to apply knowledge wisely.
Okay.
It also emphasizes courage, the willingness to speak truth to power, even when it's risky.
Right.
And of course, integrity, staying true to your values, even in a corrupt system. These are qualities that transcend time and remain relevant in any leadership context.
It's like that saying, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Right.
Human nature, the dynamics of power, those things haven't really changed that much, have they?
You're right.
Right.
And that's what makes these ancient stories so compelling. They speak to something fundamental about the human experience, regardless of the time period or the cultural context.
Now let's touch on something that keeps coming up in these stories.
Okay.
The idea of empires rising and falling.
Yeah.
It's a recurring theme in the book of Daniel, and it seems like a cautionary tale for those in positions of authority, doesn't it?
It is. And it's not just a theme in Daniel, it's central to much of the Bible.
Right.
And reflects a worldview that recognizes the impermanence of worldly power. No matter how mighty an empire may seem, it eventually faces decline. That's a powerful message, especially in a culture obsessed with power and dominance.
So how does this ancient concept of empires rising and falling resonate with us today? I mean, we don't really have kings and empires in the same way anymore.
True, the political landscape has changed, but the underlying principle remains relevant. Think about the rise and fall of corporations, political movements, even cultural trends.
Right.
They all go through cycles of growth dominance and eventual decline.
It's like no matter how big or powerful something seems, it's eventually going to face challenges, maybe even collapse.
And often that decline is brought about by internal factors. Corruption, hubris, a loss of vision or purpose. It's not always about external enemies. Sometimes it's about the seeds of destruction being sown from within.
It's almost like a natural cycle, like the changing of seasons.
Yeah.
There's a time for everything and nothing lasts forever.
Exactly.
Right.
Recognizing this cycle can help us make wiser decisions, both personally and collectively. It encourages humility, reminds us not to get too attached to worldly success and to focus on building something that has lasting value.
And let's talk about something a bit more personal.
Okay.
The importance of courage and integrity.
Yeah.
Daniel and his friends repeatedly face situations where they have to choose between compromising their beliefs or facing severe consequences.
Right.
What strikes you about their choices in those moments?
Their choices are incredibly inspiring. They demonstrate that true faith isn't passive. It requires active resistance to injustice and a willingness to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult or dangerous.
Okay.
And it's not just about grand gestures of defiance. It's about the everyday choices we make.
So it's about maintaining your integrity in all your interactions, even when it seems like everyone else is cutting corners or looking the other way.
Absolutely.
Right.
It's about speaking truth to power, refusing to be complicit in wrongdoing and holding fast to your values, even when it's inconvenient or unpopular.
It's like choosing the harder right over the easier wrong.
Yeah,
And those choices, though often challenging, ultimately shape who we are and what we stand for.
precisely.
Right.
And they leave a legacy not just for ourselves, but for those who come after us.
Now, I have to ask about something that's always fascinated me.
Okay.
The idea of divine intervention.
Yeah.
We see these incredible miracles throughout the book of Daniel.
We do?
The fiery furnace, the lion's den.
Right.
How are we supposed to understand those events in a modern context?
That's a question that's been debated for centuries.
Yeah.
Right. And there's no easy answer.
Okay.
Some interpretations take a literal view, believing these events happened exactly as described, while others see them as symbolic narratives conveying deeper truths about faith and the nature of God.
So how do we reconcile those different perspectives? Do we have to choose one or the other?
I think the key lies in focusing on the core message of these stories, regardless of their historical accuracy.
Yeah, okay.
They highlight the power of faith, the possibility of divine intervention, and the importance of trusting in a force greater than ourselves, even when facing seemingly insurmountable obstacles.
It's like saying that even if the details are metaphorical, the underlying message of hope and resilience is real.
Exactly. And that message is something we can all draw strength from, regardless of our individual beliefs or how we interpret the specifics of the stories.
Now, I don't want to rush past another incredible story. Daniel in the lion's den. Darius, the new ruler, appoints Daniel to a high position, but this sparks jealousy among other officials who trick Darius into signing a decree that basically outlaws prayer to anyone but the king.
It's a classic case of religious persecution disguised as a loyalty test.
Right.
But Daniel, in his unwavering commitment to prayer, refuses to comply.
Right.
He's willing to risk his life rather than compromise his faith.
And for that, he's thrown into a den of lions.
He is.
It's almost like a replay of the fiery furnace.
Right.
This impossible situation designed to eliminate a perceived threat.
But once again, we see the theme of divine protection at play.
Right.
Daniel emerges from the den, unharmed, a testament to his faith in God's power.
And to add a touch of poetic justice, Daniel's accusers end up in the lion's den themselves, facing the very fate they had intended for him.
It underscores the idea that those who plot evil often become the victims of their own schemes.
Right.
There's a sense of moral balance being restored.
It seems like we're seeing a pattern here.
Yeah.
Unwavering faith, divine intervention, and the eventual triumph of good over evil. It's a powerful narrative that continues to resonate throughout history.
Indeed.
Right.
These stories offer hope and encouragement, reminding us that even in the face of great adversity, courage and integrity can prevail. And perhaps more importantly, they point toward a force beyond ourselves, a power that can sustain us through even the darkest of times.
We've talked a lot about the stories in the book of Daniel, but one thing that keeps coming back to me is the emphasis on dreams and visions.
Yeah.
It's almost like a different way of understanding the world, a way of knowing things beyond our usual senses.
Right.
What do you think it is about dreams and visions that makes them such a powerful element in these stories?
It's fascinating how dreams are presented as a legitimate form of communication in the book of Daniel, a way for God to reveal his plans and purposes, to bypass the usual channels of human understanding.
Right.
It challenges us to consider the role of intuition, inspiration, and even the subconscious in our own lives.
Right.
Are we paying attention to those subtle nudges, those flashes of insight that might come to us in unexpected ways?
It makes you wonder if we've lost touch with that way of knowing, that openness to messages that might come through in less conventional forms.
It's certainly a possibility.
Yeah.
We live in a world that prioritizes logic and reason,
Right.
often dismissing the intuitive or the mystical as mere superstition. But perhaps the book of Daniel invites us to reconsider, to expand our understanding of how knowledge and guidance can be accessed.
Now, I have to ask about the elephant in the room.
Okay.
The end times prophecies in the book of Daniel.
Right.
They've always been a source of fascination and debate, haven't they?
They have. What's your take on them?
You're right.
Yeah.
They're some of the most discussed and debated passages in the entire Bible.
Right.
And it's important to acknowledge that interpreting these prophecies is a complex and nuanced task.
There are different schools of thought, each with its own set of assumptions and methodologies. So there's no single right answer, no definitive interpretation that everyone agrees on.
So how do we approach these prophecies without getting lost in the weeds of conflicting interpretations? What's the best way to engage with them?
I think the beauty of these prophecies lies in their open-ended nature.
Okay.
They invite us to engage in thoughtful reflection and dialogue,
Mm.
to consider multiple perspectives,
Yeah.
and to seek deeper understanding, rather than trying to pinpoint specific dates or events,
Yeah.
which has often led to misinterpretations and even harmful predictions.
Right.
We can focus on the larger themes and principles they convey.
So it's more about understanding the underlying message than about trying to predict the future with absolute certainty.
Exactly.
Hmm.
The book of Daniel isn't meant to be a roadmap to the apocalypse, but rather a call to faithfulness and vigilance. A reminder that even amidst uncertainty and turmoil, there's a larger plan at work, a divine purpose guiding the course of history.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the book of Daniel, what key takeaways do you hope our listeners will carry with them? What are the enduring lessons of these ancient stories?
I hope they'll come away with a deeper appreciation for the power of faith,
Right.
the importance of integrity, and the courage it takes to stand up for what's right, even in the face of opposition. I hope they'll be inspired by Daniel's example.
Yeah.
His unwavering commitment to his values, his willingness to face challenges head-on, and his ability to find meaning and purpose, even in the midst of captivity.
And perhaps they'll also be inspired to pay more attention to those whispers of intuition,
Yes.
those dreams and visions that might offer guidance and insight in their own lives.
That's right. The
Right.
book of Daniel reminds us that knowledge and wisdom can come from unexpected sources, that the divine can speak to us in ways we might not anticipate.
It's been an incredible journey exploring the timeless wisdom of the book of Daniel. Thank you for sharing your insights and helping us unpack these fascinating stories.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
I always find something new to appreciate in these ancient texts, and I hope our listener will be inspired to continue their own exploration of the book of Daniel.
And to our listener, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've gained some new perspectives and maybe even been challenged to think about these stories in a fresh way. Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep exploring the fascinating world of knowledge that surrounds us.